中间这个是我的父亲，是那郎亲。
娘娘，
哎，
娘娘好吗？
好。
哎呀，好久不见了。
哎，就是。
你穿的好漂亮啊！
哎呦，伊莎贝老人好得很，说我就很喜欢。
我到扬州奶奶给你们唱个那个以前，伊莎贝奶奶教她的那首歌啊。
80年前唱的那个教的那个歌。
啊，就是。
哈哈，真好。
若儿说，见知道那水。妹儿你，见知道那水。
Row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, life is but a dream.
Life is but a dream.
David 不在这里。
To Dad, to a communist, Mum.
Communist, yes.
Yes, British Jewish communist.
Everybody.
So, I wish you happiness all the time.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy
Happy birthday to Isabel. Happy birthday to you.
Well, you've lived in this flat for 65 years.
那有很多机会可以换房子，都不去换。
他不愿意换。
不愿意换。
Dear Isabel, 105 is such a special and a beautiful number. It's a number that tells us a lot about you. A large part of the 105 years you have dedicated to helping the Chinese Revolution and the Chinese people.
Thank you.
新中国英语教学的拓荒者，为我国培养了大量外语人才，为中国教育事业和对外交流，促进中国与加拿大民间友好，做出杰出贡献。
In ancient times, the older people would tell things to the younger people. Then the older people forget, but the younger people remember. And then when the younger people grow old, they pass it on to the next generation. So all kinds of histories are passed on.
Most fortunate.
Most fortunate, yes.
My mother's parents were Canadian missionaries. My grandpa came to China in 1912, the year after the Republic of China was set up, and my grandmother came in 1913. They were not acquainted, but they met in China. They fell in love and got married in Chengdu, and then had my mother in 1915. They married in January and she was born in December. So that was before the Chinese Communist Party was founded in 1921.
在华西的时候的话，伊莎白的父亲他就在负责这个学校的教育系啊，他是这个教育系的负责人。
Some students were arrested by the police and taken and locked up in the police station. Word was sent to my grandpa, and he immediately went to the police station and demanded their release. They did release these students, so they were very grateful to my grandpa. Well, they were patriotic students, and if they were communists, you know, that didn't deter him. With my grandmother also, my grandmother was on the board of the YWCA and also on the board for the church. Sishengci is the largest Christian Protestant church in Chengdu. The church building had a big hall, and it was very good for public meetings. Some members of the YWCA wanted to use the hall to hold sessions. Interestingly, some of them were underground Chinese communists. And some of the other board members said, "You don't know, some of them are underground communists. You'll be used." But my grandmother said, "It's a good cause. I don't care if it's communists. These are young people who care about the country, care about China. Let them have their..." And they did have the meeting.
伊莎白也是在这个华西出生的，哈，华西出生的，在这儿长大的，一直就在这个校园里面玩耍长大。
My parents worked in the university, and we had a house on the campus, and that's where I lived. It was a very big house, and we had foreign servants, so that's the sort of place we lived. One thing I did was climbing on the roofs.
It was a few years after the Long March. She lived in a Tibetan village, and she said the Red Army had passed through the valleys where she went, and she could see slogans painted by the Red Army, and she found that quite interesting. She had gone to university in Canada and studied there, psychology and anthropology, and she was very interested in the Chinese, especially the Chinese minority ethnic groups, the Yi people, the Miao people, and the Tibetans. So she decided to come back and study. So she came back in 1938.
I'm sitting on the grass by the wayside, right at the top of the pass, and spread out before me are the most incredible snow mountains. They mount right up, seem to pierce the sky. In the valley are dozens of fluffy white clouds. This is the life.
Is我爸爸引进来的。伊莎白的父亲就说的，我有个女儿，要想到你想去嘛。 认不到人，认不到人就去不成。我爸爸就给他说的，嘿，你要来生就我带他进去就说了，饭有人给他做，那个做当也有。
I think he was a very intelligent man.
吃嘛，人家大家都是一起吃，他们爱吃荞面，酸菜荞面，我们娘娘就爱擀个面。
说了认亲，在认识了他的伊莎贝的父母亲以后，同时他们的父母亲跟随说了人先多次到礼县以后，感觉这个地方，第一是民风淳朴，第二是这个地方的民俗构成呢有多样性。都江堰到礼县，他大概会花1个星期左右的时间。伊莎贝是前后在礼县干坡80楼待了9个月左右，那么在礼县呢也到藏族的聚居区、江族聚居区，他都做大量的社会调查。
已经是我表妹的儿子，今年22个年期的，他一起看伊莎贝楼进来，2个年是。
我就是去的时候拿着哈达，我都准备给他下跪，那个他因为太窄了，那个地方就没跪下去啊，我就把哈达献给他。你想在民国时期，我们这个地方又不通路，又不通电，他能让他的一个花季少女的一个女儿放心放在这里，可想对朋友的信任。后来他走以后，就成了一个传说了。
And as soon as it got close, the first thing he said is, "That is a gung-ho spinning wheel you've got." So then I found out it was Rui Ali. So we stopped and had a talk, and I was so interested. But the reason he told me that he was coming down from Sungpan. That's 10 days' walk.
In 1938, Madame Sung Ching-ling and some other people had set up something called the China Defense League, and also gung-ho. Oh, I'm wearing a gung-ho badge here. Gung-ho was set up in an effort to a united front between the communists and the nationalists to fight the Japanese aggression and help the refugees and so on. My mother got involved in that. One of the women who was working for the China Defense League was an Austrian woman called Ruth Weiss. My mother met her in Chengdu, and she was working for gung-ho and the China Defense League, and my mother borrowed books on communism from Ruth Weiss.
Then to Ruth Weiss to get some communist literature. I never took time during my university course to learn how to be a communist if I wished. Now's the time to get my ideas sorted.
She had spent almost 2 years studying a village in then Sichuan, which was called Xinglongchang. Xinglong translates as prosperity. So actually Prosperity's predicament is about a village called Prosperity.
This picture是1940年到1941年，伊莎贝来到璧山大兴镇红岭村。
他当时呢，到了兴隆场的时候，他是以一个双重身份，一方面呢，他是作为一个人类学者啊，他想记录在战时一个小香厂里边的那段特殊的这么一个风貌，但另一方面呢，以一个实践者和乡村建设者的身份，然后呢，去推动当地农民生活的改进。
My mother and her team, they stayed, as I said, they interviewed I don't know, maybe 259 families or something, or the entire population of the village over a period of 2 years, and they recorded each visit.
这栋房子是伊莎白在大兴居住后唯一留下这一栋房子。
异国他乡的，别个来做那么多工作，做那么多事，我就觉得那个人的思想是很伟大的。当时那个时候是战争年代。
从大理就能看到整个兴农场100年的这个政治权力的变迁，包括经济结构的变迁，包括其他一些社会风俗的变迁，我觉得在这里面我们都能看到。兴农场的这一段经历，对于伊莎白女士成为坚定的共产主义战士是一个非常重要的一个阶段。在这个过程中，她其实目睹了抗战大后方的民众在这个抗日战争的征粮征丁的这样的一个过程中的社会生活。一方面呢是目睹了国民政府他在乡村改造的失败，另一方面呢，其实他也参与了这个乡建团体的这个参与乡村改造的局限性。我觉得这两者可能让他进一步去探讨中国社会的出路到底在什么地方。
While doing the research, they wanted also to provide some service to the community, and so they had a little clinic with a nurse who gave free consultations. They also had a kindergarten, and also they organized literacy classes.
这张照片是伊莎白的学生曹红英的老家，在大兴区医院附近。
哎，三哥，哎，这是
伊莎白，你还像不像伊莎白啊？
当然像哦，
当然像，
像脸对。
It is market day today, and so the rural member of the congregation parked their products at the church while they attended the service. 2 chickens that sat across the aisle from me had several disputes, but we just ignored them.
My mother was brought up with a Christian ethic of service. I think she gradually came to see that the Chinese communists were doing a very good job serving the needs of the common people, and that's why she turned to communism. My dad came to China in 1938. He became a teacher for the first time in his life, teaching at St. John's University. And he got another job teaching in Jinling Daxue, the Nanking University. Suddenly, the British and the Japanese were at war. My father was very wise. He decided very quickly to leave Shanghai. A few weeks after he left, all the Japanese rounded up all the British people and put them in an internment camp, sort of a bit like a concentration camp. But my father escaped, and he made his way a long way round, went to Hong Kong, Haiphong, Vietnam, and Yunnan, Guizhou, and made his way to Sichuan. When he got to Chengdu, that's where he met my mother.
My sister was teaching at Nanjing University, where David was. And my sister, when she woke up in the morning, wasn't feeling well, so she said, "Would you take my class?" So I went in, went to her desk, sat down at her desk in the English department at Nanjing University. And before long, a young man entered, a young Englishman came in, walked past my desk, saying, "Oh, you're doing your hair a new way," and then went on, sat at his desk. And I was so amazed at this remark, why he would make that remark. It was only later, when after the classes were over, when he noticed that I wasn't Julia, that I was a sister that looked very much like Julia.
The two of them fell in love. At that time, my mother, she was political, but she was not a communist. She was still mainly a pacifist. In 1936, when Franco started the civil war in Spain, my father volunteered to join the international brigades in Spain to fight fascism. He got permission from the British Party to go there. He was wounded in the Battle of Jarama, but he stayed on afterwards, and Spanish Civil War was over. He came to China. During his stay in Spain, after he was wounded, he went to a hospital, and it happened to be the hospital where Bethune was working. So my father met Bethune. Bethune and his friends were passing around interesting books. And one of the interesting books was Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow. My father arranged a trip to go to Ludingqiao. One reason was he knew the heroic story, the Red Army heroically crossing the bridge.
But upon their arrival, the Reds found that half this wooden flooring had been removed, and before them only the bare iron chains swung to a point midway in the stream. And who would have thought the Reds would insanely try to cross the chains alone? But that's what they did.
他就在那个泸定桥旁边的一个小茶馆里面喝茶，就在等那个克鲁克，好像等了很久都没见克鲁克来，他就有点失望啊，就看能不能再等一会儿。当时呢，他们一块儿还有几个朋友嘛，那几个朋友就说算了，可能克鲁克不会来了，干脆他们就先走了。然后伊莎白呢还在那儿等，他说我再等一等。结果在等的时候，一下就看到克鲁克高大的身影从那边过来了。
So they went to the bridge, and my father asked my mother if she would marry him. So proposed to her at the bridge.
He had fought in Spain and was very political, so I found it much easier to have a cause and have it to be communism.
You didn't get married in Chengdu, you know. Because there was a war going on,
yes.
And the Nazis had invaded Soviet Union.
Yes.
So the two of you traveled to England.
Yeah.
And in England, you got married. Also, you joined the army.
Yeah.
Dad joined the British Royal Air Force, and you joined the Canadian Army. But when you got married in London, do you remember that? You went to the registrar's office, the registry, marriage registry,
yeah.
And to declare that you wanted to get married. And they said, well, where are your witnesses?
I went and found some.
Yeah, oh, you did. Where did you find them?
They were builders on a building on the street.
But as we entered the office building, I had noticed a couple of house painters on the job. All right, Governor, they said, when I asked them to be witnesses. It'd be a pleasure. All the world loves a lover. You joined the Communist Party, as I think it was on the 1st of January 1943. You joined in London.
I went around selling daily workers.
Yeah, that's
but not on the street.
Oh.
I went to the houses.
Yeah, oh, I see.
I go to their houses and knock on the door. And
yeah, oh, I see. Tell them the news, yeah.
Arouse a little interest. I wanted to be an anthropologist. And then I heard that there's land reform going on in China. And I thought that I would have an opportunity, because I was a communist and had good relations with the the Chinese Communist Party, I thought that I could go back and really get into the land reform, not just be a foreign observer.
The revolutionary movement, ever since its objectives had been precisely defined under the guidance of Mao Zedong, had never been indiscriminately directed against privately owned commerce and industry. Its main target was the destruction of the feudal system, the driving out of the imperialists, and the establishment of a new democracy which would better the people's livelihood. It was the end of November 1947 when we reached 10 Mile Inn. The stalks of the Indian corn still stood in the surrounding fields, but the cobs were already plucked. First I learnt something of the meaning of poverty, such as poverty as in my ignorance I had not expected in the liberated areas. And within the limits of their poverty, the peasants were generous and hospitable.
克鲁克伊莎白人夫妇吧，来我们这儿给我们同吃同住同劳动。白天出去采访一天，到晚上来回来就熬夜写材料、打字，就是个没有灯儿。以前没有电了，就是个没有灯儿。除了采访、吃饭，就是学习、看书。
他们经过6个多月的实地采访，包括开会，包括跟我们这个驻十里店的一些边区政府的机构、中央局的一些领导、边区政府的一些领导，包括采访当地的一些老百姓，掌握了大量的第一手的资料，完了写了十里店1和2两本书。
For the overwhelming majority of villagers, life in 10 Mile Inn was far better all round by the end of 1947 than it had been 7 years before. Middle peasants, old and new, now formed about 2/3 of the village population. Landlords and rich peasants, tenants and long-term labourers had practically disappeared. 10 Mile Inn had become a community of small owners with roughly equal holdings, a community of middle peasants, run by middle peasants, and mostly new middle peasants at that.
这2本书出版以后呢，对中国革命，尤其对中国土地改革这个影响是非常非常大的。
The experiences of this experimental work team, and of others like it, went into the drafting of the agrarian law promulgated in 1950 by the government of the People's Republic of China. It was in accordance with this law that land reform was carried out between 1950 and 1952 throughout all the newly liberated areas of China.
我这个十里店书啊，进行了编排，进行校对。你看，他是教堂岛上，他是百姓公司或者寺庙式的人，他来到中国为中国人服务了，那咱中国人，咱不能说，跟你不好啊。教堂岛人或英国人或中国人，人民都是非常有益的。
They wanted to have some what they call party life, but for that they needed three members minimum. There were only 2, so they asked the Communist Party of China organization if they could lend them a member to make 3, and they said, okay, we'll lend you 2. So these 2 communists joined my mother and father to form a party group in the village of Shilidian.
Until the British Party set up a group here, and that was in 54. And so there was a small British Party group, so we were transferred from the Chinese group to the English group. But before that, we were treated as full Chinese members.
Over the crest of a hill, there suddenly appeared a file of 500 men. They were recruits to the People's Liberation Army. We had seen Chinese recruits before in Kuomintang, China, during the war against Japan, They were roped together and under guard. These Liberation Army recruits were neither roped nor guarded. They were volunteers, not conscripts, and they sang as they swung along.
The communists issued the farmers with their land. So then the farmers were afraid that the Kuomintang would take back this land. So they sent their sons to the army to defend the land. That was a very effective way to protect the land. I remember this picture. I'm talking with the woman in the door. Yes, that's when they got the land. They joined the army. They were sent by their mothers.
这不是毛主席当时说过吗？47年的时候说过，你看，当时美国记者斯特朗对毛主席提出问题，说你对最后胜利是否有过怀疑？毛主席的回答根本不提军事，只谈土地改革。他就说，那就要看我们的土地改革工作完成的好不好。蒋介石肯定要失败，因为他反对农民的土地要求。如果我们能够解决土地问题，我们就一定会胜利。实际上，最终的结果还确实就是这样，因为我们解决了大多数农民的土地问题，所以迸发出了无穷的力量，所以就打败了蒋介石。
They came to the city of Shijiazhuang, which is now the capital city of Hebei province, but in those days it was the first city that was liberated by the communists in 1947. So they came here and actually they were planning to head back to England. It was here that some leaders of the Chinese Communist Party asked if they would stay and teach. Well, my parents, when they left England, the Communist Party of Great Britain had told them if the Chinese comrades asked you to help in any way, to do something, then you should definitely consider it. And so they were in a bit of a dilemma because they did want to go back. However, in the end, they decided that they would stay. This is a typical peasant home in North China. It was all papered over. There was no glass. And when they were here, my parents said that sometimes if kids were curious and wanted to look in, they could just lick their finger, touch the paper, and it would get wet and you could see through it. Many of the classes had to be conducted outside, but to establish good relations, they joined in the farm work. I see that here there's an old storeroom here, and they still got some, look at this hoe. My father said that in the summer of 48, when they had the summer harvest, the entire faculty and staff and students all joined in with the harvest. 1949, Beijing was liberated. The school relocated to Beijing.
You arrived in Beijing just in time to see the PLA's triumphant entry into the city.
Oh,
yeah.
Who's triumphant?
The People's Liberation Army.
Army. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember.
那一天要搞那个入城式，我走的那个军车、卡车，清早到解放军的司令部。我刚下车，我看一群军人从司令部出来，在内有马海德，
The end of January 1949, my mother had just entered and she was able to mount on top of Qianmen to review the troops. Up there was Nie Rongzhen, Ye Jianying, and so on, and she met these leaders of the Chinese Revolution. The triumphal entry went on for 6 hours, and she said it was so impressive.
Then the school expanded and there were more teachers, more students. In 1949, one of the people who came to the school was Chen Lin, your old friend. Chen Lin came, yes.
It's not a very thick book, but I value it very much because it is my memories of my old friends, including the Crooks. They came to China to help the Chinese people with the continuation of the revolution and also the building of a new country. Before we moved to our place here, it was in Dongjiao-Minxiang. At that time, we didn't have very good classrooms. We taught the students in the courtyard, sitting on small chairs.
Again, my parents were both able to go to the viewing stands and watch a triumphal parade for the founding of the People's Republic of China.
So we were there when we heard Chairman Mao announce the establishment of the people had stood up and established the People's Republic. And then there was a magnificent parade, military first and then civilian parade following.
During the parade on the founding of the People's Republic of China, again, it was many, many hours long, and my parents were on the viewing stands on the north side of what is now Chang'anjie. My brother, Carl, was born in August, so he was almost 2 months old and needed to be fed every few hours. So he was in the Yuheqiao, well, what is now Zhengyilu. My mother would cross the road, passing through the parade to go to feed him. And then she would come back and continue. I bet that was the only person at the parade who had to go through the troops and and feed her baby.
Before Madam Sun Qingling was made the honorary president of our country, Comrade David Crook, he himself made a suggestion to our government proposing that we should make Madam Sun Qingling the president of our country. Well, Isabel was of a little different idea because she said, well, as the president of New China, he or she must first of all be a communist.
So much of our life was spent here on the campus, here at Beihai. Our closest friends were right here in Beijing, our fellow teachers. The people we cared about most were here in Beijing, not in England.
This is 2 years ago.
Yes.
When we were celebrating the Moon Festival. We taught one class for 1 year, 2 semesters together. And I've learned something very important in my life from you.
I'm very flattered.
You're flattered. You are not flattered. You showed me your notebook, and you put down the student's name in the book, and put down their problems in their studies, like which sound was not right, things like that. It was like a map. I really have learned something very important in my life about teaching, about how to help the students. And all started from you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. But, you had a lot to do with it.
We share one word, that is love.
Yeah.
Many of my mother's former students contributed to this endeavor, and some of them became diplomats, including ambassadors for China in many countries, for example, Britain and Canada, and so on.
A work that I've brought along is a Chinese-English dictionary. My dad was made the chief consultant, David Crook, chief consultant.
In the late 80s, 1980s, David and Isabel were planning trips to the United States and Britain. Now, one day, just before they left, David asked me to go to their place and then gave me a piece of paper. He said, "This is our will." I was taken by surprise because I've never met a situation like that. And I didn't know how to respond in this situation because I've never seen anybody's will. He said to me, "This is our will. When we have left, please forward it to the party organization." 就唱这个歌，然后回忆过去的一些事情。Wherever the people want us to go, we are ready to go there.
Wherever the party wants us to go, we will go there. One of the things in the early days, whenever class graduated, they always sang the song. We've got many of our early graduates scattered all over China.
From the 1940s to the 1980s, 40 years you were a teacher, Mum.
Sounds like a pretty big thing.
I have not only never regretted it, but feel that it's been a great privilege to be able to be at the center of one of the most vibrant and active countries in the world.
1981年第2次到璧山，也是第1次回访璧山。当时我就担任伊莎贝随同的摄影记者，踏实肯干，深入实意，调查研究，以事实说话，让人非常佩服。
来要过后，每一个场镇，每个基本上他都要去看一看，走走看看，而且他也非常赞赏我们那个当地，就特别是我们中国的发展。每一次来，对于他来说，他非常高兴，就一次比一次好。
You're 105 and you've spent about 90 years in China.
I'm glad I did what I did.